The blue glow of the holographic message cast strange shadows across the dimly lit conference room on Lunar Station. Ambassador Kim Dae-ho stood perfectly still, his dark eyes scanning the floating symbols that represented 12 of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Each symbol told a story of conquest, expansion, and dominance that stretched back millions of years. "Sir, this is what we've been waiting for," said Park So-young, his deputy, as she stepped closer to examine the message. Her voice was steady, but Dae-ho could hear the tension underneath. After 15 years of diplomatic service, she had learned to read between the lines of alien communications better than anyone else in the human fleet. The message was written in formal galactic standard, the language used for official business between species. But even through the polite words, the real meaning was clear. The Galactic Council was not inviting humanity to join them as equals. They were summoning humans like a parent calls a misbehaving child to explain themselves. Dae-ho walked to the large window that looked out toward Earth. The blue marble hung in space like a jewel, its surface dotted with the lights of massive orbital stations and shipping lanes. It was beautiful, but it was also small compared to the vast empires that controlled most of the galaxy. "How long have they been watching us?" asked Lieutenant Commander Yoon Min-ho, the youngest member of their team. His fingers moved nervously over his datapad as he pulled up intelligence reports about Council activities in human space. "Since we first left the solar system," Park replied. "Maybe longer. They've been tracking every colony ship, every mining operation, every research station we've built. They know exactly how far we've spread." The truth was that humanity had been expanding faster than anyone expected, including themselves. What had started as a few scientific outposts had grown into a network of 37 star systems. Human ships were exploring regions of space that the Council had ignored for centuries, finding resources and establishing trade routes that challenged the established order. "They're not happy about it," Dae-ho said quietly. He had spent 3 decades studying alien psychology and politics. The Council's invitation was not a welcome mat. It was a warning. "The meeting is set for Concordia Prime," Park continued, reading from the message. "Neutral territory. They want us there in 2 weeks." Dae-ho nodded slowly. Concordia Prime was a massive space station that served as the Council's meeting place for important negotiations. It was also designed to intimidate visitors with its size and alien architecture. Everything about the invitation was calculated to make humans feel small and out of place. "Sir, should we accept?" asked Yoon Dae-ho, turned back to his team. These were good people, dedicated to serving humanity's interests in a galaxy that saw them as newcomers at best and threats at worst. They deserved to know what they were walking into. "We're going," he said firmly. "But we're not going as supplicants, we're going as representatives of a free and sovereign species. They may not respect us yet, but they will," as his staff began. Preparing for the journey to Concordia Prime, Dae-ho remained at the window, watching Earth turn slowly in the darkness. Humanity had come so far from their origins on that small blue world. Soon the galaxy would learn just how far they were willing to go. The space station called Concordia Prime was unlike anything humans had ever built. It stretched across several kilometers of empty space, its twisted spires glowing with colors that had no names in human language. The structure seemed to pulse like a living thing, its walls made of materials that shifted between solid and transparent, depending on the angle of view. Ambassador Kim Dae-ho felt very small as he walked through corridors that were clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them, and the walls curved in ways that hurt to look at for too long. Everything about this place was meant to remind visitors that they were outsiders in a universe controlled by others. The council chamber was even worse. 12 massive chairs arranged in a perfect circle, each one designed for a different alien species. The chair assigned to humanity was barely large enough for a child, positioned slightly outside the main ring, as if they were an afterthought. "Please, take your place," said the session moderator, a floating cloud of gas that somehow managed to sound bored. The other delegates were already seated, their various forms creating a gallery of nightmare shapes that belonged in horror stories rather than diplomatic meetings. Kethvar of the Hegemony was the first to speak. His species looked like giant insects crossed with machines, with forearms that moved independently and eyes that glowed red in the dim light. When he talked, his voice sounded like grinding metal. "The solution is simple," Kethvar announced, his arms waving in dismissive gestures. "Humans stop expanding. You keep your 37 little systems and learn to be satisfied with what you have. No more colony ships, no more exploration, no more problems." The other delegates nodded in agreement, making sounds that might have been laughter in their various languages. To them, this was not a negotiation. It was a sentencing. The Luminari delegate spoke next. Her species appeared to be made of pure light, shifting and flowing like water, but her words were sharp as knives. "Your research into quantum drives must be handed over to proper authorities. Such dangerous technology should not be in the hands of primitives. Cultural oversight is also necessary," added the representative of the hive minds, his insect-like features clicking as he spoke. "Human colonies show disturbing signs of independence. This must be corrected through proper education and monitoring." Deputy Ambassador Li Minho sat beside Daeho, taking careful notes on everything being said. His face remained calm, but his hands gripped his writing pad tightly enough to leave marks. These were not terms being offered. These were orders being given. The worst came from the Zephyrian delegate, whose crystalline body rang like bells when she moved. "Your faster-than-light technology is amusing," she said, her voice carrying the tone adults use when praising children's artwork. "So primitive, so inefficient. With centuries of proper guidance, you might eventually build something that actually works." The chamber filled with more sounds that might have been alien laughter. Every delegate seemed to find great entertainment in discussing human limitations and failures. Ambassador Daeho sat quietly through it all, his expression never changing. He had expected this treatment, but experiencing it was different from imagining it. These beings saw humanity as nothing more than troublesome children who needed to be controlled. "We appreciate your generous offer," he finally said, his voice steady and diplomatic. "We will need time to consider these terms." The aliens exchanged looks that clearly said they wondered how much time such simple creatures could possibly need to understand such obvious logic. The 21st day of negotiations began like all the others. Ambassador Kim Dae-ho entered the council chamber to find the alien delegates already discussing how to divide human territory among themselves, as if the humans in the room were invisible. "The mining rights in the Kepler system should go to the hegemony," Kethvar was saying, his forearms moving over a holographic star map. "We have the most experience with asteroid extraction." "What about the agricultural worlds?" asked the Luminari delegate, her form pulsing with interest. "Those fertile planets would be perfect for our expansion plans." Deputy Li Minho leaned over to whisper in Daeho's ear. "Sir, they're not even pretending to negotiate anymore. They're just deciding what to take from us." Daeho nodded silently. Over the past 3 weeks, every human suggestion had been laughed at, every compromise offer had been rejected, and every attempt to find middle ground had been met with new demands. The aliens had made it clear that they saw only one acceptable outcome: complete human surrender. The session moderator, still floating like a bored cloud of gas, finally acknowledged the human presence. "Ambassador Daeho, do you have any response to the Council's final offer?" The final offer was worse than the first one. Humans would be restricted to just 20 systems instead of 37. All military ships would be scrapped. Human colonies would be placed under direct alien supervision. It was not a peace treaty. It was a slavery contract. Daeho stood up slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. His small delegation rose with him, their chairs scraping against the strange metal floor. The sound echoed in the vast chamber. Most of the alien delegates did not even look up from their data tablets. They expected another human complaint, another desperate plea for better terms, another sign of human weakness they could exploit. "Distinguished delegates," Daeho said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "The Terran Coalition thanks the Galactic Council for the time and consideration you have shown during these discussions." Something in his tone made several alien heads turn. The Hegemarch's red eyes focused on the human ambassador with new attention. After careful consideration of all proposals and counter-proposals, Dai-Ho continued, humanity has decided to withdraw from these negotiations. We appreciate the clarity you have provided regarding the Council's position. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's systems seemed to pause. We wish you all success in your future endeavors, Dai-Ho concluded. The Hagemarch's massive form lurched forward, his metal voice grinding with disbelief. You cannot simply leave, human. There are established protocols, legal procedures, which we have followed exactly. Deputy Lee Min-ho interrupted smoothly, his fingers moving over his datapad. All required withdrawal documents have been filed with the central system. Everything is completely legal. The human delegation began walking toward the chamber's exit. Behind them, alien voices rose in confusion and anger. They had expected humans to beg, to plead, to offer even more concessions. They had never imagined humans would simply walk away. The Zephyrian delegate's crystalline laughter rang out like breaking glass. They will return within a month, she called after them, crawling back desperate for our mercy. Ambassador Dai-Ho paused at the threshold, his hand on the doorframe. He turned back one last time, his eyes meeting each alien gaze in turn. Perhaps, he said quietly. But perhaps not. The doors sealed shut behind them with a soft hiss that sounded almost like a sigh. The council chamber felt more relaxed than it had in years. 6 months had passed since the humans walked out of negotiations, and the galaxy seemed to have returned to its natural order. The quarterly resource meeting was proceeding exactly as it always had, with each species calmly claiming their share of newly discovered star systems. The Kepler 442 system looks very promising, said the Vorthak representative, his crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. Rich asteroid belts, 3 gas giants with valuable atmospheres, and no intelligent life to complicate extraction. Hagemarch Torkul made a sound of approval, his massive form shifting in his oversized chair. With the human problem solved, we can finally develop these systems properly. No more interference from primitive species who do not understand galactic economics. The other delegates shared gestures of satisfaction. The human crisis had been resolved without firing a single shot. Sometimes the old ways were still the best ways, a show of superior force, a demonstration of political reality, and troublesome upstarts learned their place. Our intelligence networks report minimal human activity, continued Torkul, reviewing data on his personal display. A few exploration ships here and there, but nothing like their previous expansion rate. It appears that losing access to Council resources has significantly limited their capabilities. The newest member of the Council, representing the aquatic depth swimmers, raised a tentative appendage. Their species had only recently developed spaceflight and still felt intimidated by the older, more established civilizations. Should we be monitoring them more closely? The depth swimmer asked, water bubbling around their translation device. Complete silence from an entire species seems unusual. The luminary delegate pulsed with amusement, their energy field shifting through pleased colors. Silence is exactly what we wanted to achieve. Humans are finally understanding how the galaxy really works. They tried to play with the adults and learned they were not ready. Besides, added the Zephyrian representative, her crystalline voice ringing like distant bells, what could they possibly be doing? They have limited resources, primitive technology, and no allies. The smart move for them is to focus on developing their existing systems rather than causing more trouble. The meeting continued with discussions of trade routes, mining rights, and territorial boundaries. The systems that had once been disputed with humanity were now being divided among council members like pieces of a pie. After all, if humans were not going to claim these valuable regions, someone had to put them to productive use. The Hagemarch pulled up a galactic map showing the current distribution of council territories. Large sections of space that had been marked as disputed or human interest just months ago were now colored in the various shades representing different council species. This is how expansion should work, Torkul declared. Organized, efficient, and managed by civilizations with the experience to handle such responsibilities. As the meeting concluded, The delegates were already making plans for their new acquisitions. Survey ships would be dispatched, mining operations would be established, and trade routes would be secured. The galaxy was returning to the stable, profitable order it had enjoyed for centuries. None of them bothered to read the footnote in their intelligence reports about unusual communications patterns in distant sectors. It was marked as low priority, just routine chatter between human colonies. Nothing worth the attention of species who controlled thousands of star systems. The humans, after all, had learned to be quiet. Captain Velshan had been flying cargo, ships between the core worlds and the rim territories for 12 years. He knew every star, every asteroid field, and every empty patch of space along his regular route. His ship, the Prophet's Edge, carried basic supplies to frontier colonies and brought raw materials back to the established worlds. That was why the massive structure hanging in empty space made no sense at all. "Navigator, check our position," Velshan ordered, his 3 eyes blinking in confusion. His species, the Keith, were known for their excellent memory and attention to detail. He was absolutely certain that this section of space had been empty just 1 month ago. "Position confirmed, Captain," replied his navigator, a nervous creature whose tentacles were currently wrapped tightly around his control station. "We are exactly where we should be, but that thing out there should not exist." The structure was enormous, stretching across several kilometers of space. It was clearly built by humans with their typical sharp angles and practical design, but the scale was unlike anything humans had ever constructed before. Industrial platforms connected by massive support beams, with hundreds of smaller ships moving around it like busy insects. "Are those weapons?" Velshan asked, adjusting his ship's sensors to get a better look at the outer edges of the construction. His navigator's tentacles curled with worry as he studied the readings. "The energy signatures are completely unknown, Captain. These weapons do not match anything in our databases. They appear to be far more advanced than standard human technology." "Should we get closer?" asked the ship's engineer. "No," Velshan said quickly. "We maintain distance and record everything. This needs to be reported to the Council immediately." But the Prophet's Edge was not the only ship making disturbing discoveries. Reports were coming in from traders, explorers and scout vessels across the galaxy's outer regions. Human construction projects in systems that the Council had dismissed as worthless. Manufacturing stations that seemed to appear overnight. Research facilities in locations that should have been impossible to reach. Most disturbing of all were the visitors. Species that had never been seen in Council space were regularly traveling to these human installations. They arrived with empty cargo holds and left carrying mysterious technology that did not appear in any known databases. When these reports finally reached the Galactic Council headquarters, they created a pile of documents that nobody wanted to read. Low-priority intelligence from frontier regions was usually ignored in favor of more important matters from the core worlds. It took 3 weeks for the reports to reach Hegemarch Torkul's personal attention. When he finally reviewed the compiled intelligence, his forearms began moving in the gesture that his species used to express deep concern and growing alarm. "How long has this been happening?" he demanded from his intelligence chief. "Our analysts believe approximately 8 months, sir," came the reply. "The activity appears to have begun shortly after the humans withdrew from peace negotiations." Torkul studied the star charts showing dozens of new human installations scattered across the galaxy's rim. Each one was positioned along trade routes that the Council had never bothered to control, in systems they had written off as economically worthless. "What are they building out there?" he asked. His intelligence staff exchanged uncertain glances. Nobody had an answer to that question, and that was the most disturbing part of all. The transmission began at exactly noon, Galactic Standard Time. Across 47 star systems, every communication device, every screen, and every data terminal suddenly displayed the same image. Ambassador Kim Dae-ho sat calmly behind a simple desk, with Deputy Lee Min-ho standing beside him. Behind them, flags representing dozens of different species created a colorful backdrop. In the Galactic Council chamber, the emergency session had been called when the broadcast began interrupting all regular programming. The alien delegates stared at their screens in growing confusion and alarm. "Citizens of the galaxy," Zhou began, his voice clear and confident, "today marks the founding of the Free Worlds Alliance, a new coalition of species committed to mutual cooperation, technological advancement, and the fundamental principle that no civilization should be denied the right to grow and prosper." Further Hegemarch's forearms moved in agitation. "How are they broadcasting on our secure channels?" he demanded. "This should be impossible with their primitive technology." But the transmission continued, and what came next was even more shocking. Names and symbols began scrolling across the screen, each one representing a different species that had joined the new alliance. The list seemed to go on forever. 43 founding members, Li Minho announced, his voice carrying the same calm confidence as his superior. "Each one has signed the Alliance Charter and committed to our shared principles of cooperation and mutual benefit." Several of the council delegates made sounds of disbelief. Some of the names on that list were species they had been protecting and controlling for centuries. The Veltar, who had been mining rare minerals for the council for over 200 years. The Zifek, whose agricultural worlds had been feeding council populations. The Mordin, whose industrial capabilities had been restricted to prevent them from becoming competitive. "This is impossible," whispered the luminary delegate, her energy field flickering with shock. "How did they contact these species? How did they convince them to join? The Alliance offers something that the traditional galactic order has never provided," Zhou continued, as if he could hear their questions. "True partnership. Our member species share technology freely, trade on equal terms, and make decisions through democratic consensus rather than imperial decree." The broadcast showed images from various Alliance worlds, Veltar engineers working alongside human technicians to build new types of spacecraft. Zifek farmers using advanced agricultural techniques that had increased their crop yields by 300%. Mordin factories producing goods with efficiency levels that exceeded anything the Council had achieved. "Every species brings unique strengths to our alliance," Li Minho explained. "The Keth contribute their exceptional navigation skills. The Rill share their expertise in biotechnology. The Thane offer their mastery of energy manipulation. Together, we are building something greater than any of us could achieve alone." The most shocking part came at the end of the broadcast. The camera pulled back to show the full scope of the room where Zhou and Li Minho were speaking. It was not a small human facility. It was a massive chamber filled with representatives from dozens of species, all working together at stations. That displayed technology far beyond anything the Council possessed. "We welcome any species interested in joining our community," Zhou concluded. "The galaxy is vast enough for all to prosper, and the Alliance is committed to ensuring that prosperity is shared rather than hoarded." The transmission ended, leaving the Council chamber in absolute silence. The first sign of trouble came from the merchants. Cargo ships that had carried goods between Council worlds for generations began changing their routes, heading toward Alliance space instead of traditional markets. The shift was subtle at first, just a few independent traders looking for better profits, but within weeks it became a flood. Chief Economic Advisor Park Jin-woo stood in the Council's emergency session, surrounded by holographic displays that painted a picture of economic disaster. Trade routes that had existed for thousands of years were simply disappearing as if they had never mattered at all. "The situation is worse than we initially calculated," she reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was describing. "Alliance worlds are selling rare earth minerals at 60% of our standard prices. Refined metals are available at 70%. Agricultural products are being offered at rates that make our own production completely uncompetitive." The Vorthak representative's crystalline body flickered with angry colors. "This is clearly economic warfare," he declared, his voice ringing like broken glass. "They are deliberately destroying established markets to weaken our position." Park. Jin-woo consulted her data before responding. "Our economic analysts have reviewed their operations extensively. The evidence suggests they are not selling below cost to damage us. They appear to be genuinely more efficient than our current systems." "Impossible," snapped the Hegemarch, his forearms moving in gestures of disbelief. "Their technology is primitive. Their methods are crude. How can they possibly outproduce civilizations that have been perfecting these processes for millions of years? Alliance mining operations use fully automated systems, Park explained, calling up detailed comparisons on her display. Their machines require no biological workers, operate around the clock without rest, and maintain safety standards that exceed galactic regulations. Our analysis shows their productivity levels are on average 300% higher than ours. The numbers were devastating, but they were not the worst part of the economic crisis. Worse were the technology demonstrations broadcasting. Daily from Alliance worlds, medical procedures that could regrow entire limbs in a matter of hours. Manufacturing techniques that created materials stronger than anything in Council databases. Agricultural systems that could transform dead planets into fertile gardens. Where did all this come from? Demanded the Luminary delegate, her energy, field pulsing with confusion and fear. Our intelligence report said humans were technologically backward. We were told they were centuries behind our development. The answer came from an unexpected source. A holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber without warning, showing Ambassador Kim Soo-jin seated calmly at a simple desk. Her expression was polite, but revealed nothing about her thoughts. "Honorable Council members," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "We understand you have questions about recent developments in Alliance space. How do you have this technology?" the Hegemarch demanded immediately. "Our intelligence indicated human capabilities were far below Council standards." Soo-jin smiled slightly, the expression not entirely friendly. "Your intelligence was based on information we chose to make public. We have learned that there are significant advantages to keeping certain capabilities private until the appropriate moment." The hologram flickered and disappeared before anyone could ask another question, leaving the Council delegates to consider how completely they had misjudged humanity's true potential. The final breaking point came when Alliance escort ships began, moving freely through space that the Council had controlled for over 1,000 years. Former client species were now traveling under Alliance protection, carrying goods and resources that had once flowed exclusively to Council worlds. Hegemarch. Torkul had endured months of economic losses and political humiliation. When his military advisors reported Alliance vessels operating in the Nexus Point region, his patience finally snapped. "Prepare the third battle fleet," he ordered. "It is time to remind the galaxy who holds real power here." The fleet that assembled was impressive by any standard. 12 massive capital ships, each one capable of destroying entire planets, supported by over 100 smaller vessels. It was the kind of overwhelming force that had kept the peace for centuries through the simple threat of its existence. Admiral Cho Yun-seo watched the approaching Council fleet from the bridge of her flagship, the Harmony's Edge. Her small, escort group of 6 ships looked pathetically outnumbered against the massive formation bearing down on them. "Admiral, they're sending a communication," reported Communications Officer Yoon Tae-min, his fingers moving quickly over his control panel. "Put it through to the main screen," Cho replied calmly. The Hegemarch's enormous form filled the display, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of dominance. His red eyes glowed with barely controlled anger. "Human vessels," he rumbled, his voice carrying the authority of millions of years of galactic supremacy. "You are operating in violation of established territorial boundaries. Withdraw immediately, or face the full consequences of your actions." Admiral Cho remained seated, her expression polite but unimpressed. "Hegemarch, these are neutral trade routes established under galactic maritime law. Our escort duties are completely legal." "Legal authority flows from power, human," Torkul replied, his weapon systems beginning to charge with visible energy. "Allow me to provide a demonstration of where true power lies." The Council fleet opened fire with devastating precision. Centuries of military experience guided their attack as energy beams powerful enough to crack moons struck the Alliance formation. The combined firepower should have vaporized the human ships instantly. Instead, the Alliance vessels absorbed the attack as if it were nothing more than a light rain. "Impossible," the Hegemarch whispered, his red eyes widening in disbelief. "Adaptive. Defensive matrices," Admiral Cho explained in the same tone she might use to discuss the weather. "Our shields analyze incoming energy patterns and automatically adjust their molecular resonance to absorb and disperse the attack. Would you like me to provide a more detailed technical briefing? What happened next was not really a battle. It was a complete education in how much the balance of power had shifted. Alliance ships moved with impossible speed and agility, turning and accelerating in ways that violated known physics. Their weapons cut through Council shields like cutting paper with scissors. Most disturbing of all, their defensive systems seemed to actually grow stronger as the fight continued. Within 17 minutes, half the Council fleet was drifting helplessly in space, their systems disabled by weapons that left no visible damage but somehow shut down every critical system. The remaining ships retreated in complete disorder. As the Council forces limped away, every species in the galaxy received the same message. The old order was finished, and something new had taken its place. The emergency session of the Galactic Council met in a chamber that felt much smaller than it had just 1 year ago. Half the seats were empty, their former occupants having quietly joined the Free Worlds Alliance over the past few months. The remaining delegates sat in an atmosphere of barely controlled panic. Economic reports painted a picture of complete collapse. Trade routes that had existed for millennia were now empty. Industrial worlds that had powered the Council's economy for centuries were shutting down as their products became worthless compared to Alliance alternatives. Military reports were even worse, describing fleet after fleet that had been disabled or destroyed by technology nobody understood. "We have no choice," said the Luminary delegate, her energy field flickering with colors that indicated extreme distress. "We must contact the humans and attempt to reach some kind of arrangement." The Hegemarch's 4 arms moved in gestures of defeat. Just months ago he had commanded fleets that could destroy star systems. Now he sat like a beggar, hoping for mercy from the species he had once dismissed as primitive children. "Perhaps they will be reasonable," suggested the Vorthak representative, though his crystalline form showed none of its usual confidence. Surely they understand that cooperation benefits everyone. The response to their communication request came within hours. Ambassador Kim Dae-ho appeared via hologram, his image clear and steady. Behind him, the Alliance Council chamber was visible, filled with representatives from dozens of species working together in harmony. "Distinguished delegates of the Galactic Council," Dae-ho began, his voice carrying the same diplomatic politeness he had used during the failed negotiations. "The Free Worlds Alliance appreciates your request for renewed discussions." "Ambassador," the Hegemarch interrupted, his desperation overriding protocol. "What would it take for humanity to consider rejoining broader galactic negotiations? Surely some accommodation can be reached." Dae-ho's expression remained calm. "Rejoining suggests that we were ever truly included in galactic governance. The Alliance has created something entirely new, a community where species contribute according to their abilities and benefit according to their needs." Deputy Lee Min-ho stepped forward, his tone surprisingly gentle. "However, the Alliance is always open to new members. Any species willing to embrace our principles of cooperation and mutual respect is welcome to apply." "Apply?" the Luminary delegate asked, her energy field pulsing with confusion. "The application process is quite straightforward," explained Alliance. Member Park So-young, her smile genuinely warm. "Prospective members must demonstrate commitment to democratic decision-making, equal treatment of all species, and the sharing of resources for mutual benefit. Our standards are not unreasonable." The Mati irony was overwhelming. The same humans who had been forced to sit in the smallest chairs, who had been lectured about their primitive technology and inferior culture, were now offering membership to their former oppressors. But the offer came with conditions that would require the Council species to abandon everything they had built their power upon. As the transmission ended, the remaining Council delegates sat in stunned silence. Through the station's viewports, Alliance ships moved through space with the confidence of those who owned the future. The age of the old Galactic Council was finished. The galaxy now belonged to those who had learned that true strength came not from forcing others to submit, but from helping them rise.